Good morning, welcome to CATEX-TV. My name is Frank Fortunato. This is a live broadcast from Princeton, New Jersey. Today is Wednesday, January 19th, 2011. It's 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the U.S., 4:30 p.m. in London, 12:30 in Hamilton, and 10:30 in Mexico City. If you need to reach us during the broadcast, you can phone in toll-free at 1-866-67-CATEX. Overseas, our AOL instant mail address is CATEX-TV. A programming note: on Monday and Tuesday of next week, we will be airing an interview with Tom Bolt, the performance director of the franchise board at Lloyd's of London. On this day in history, in 1937, Howard Hughes, known to many people as an eccentric, an old man who supposedly had very long fingernails, set the transcontinental flight record in a monoplane flying from Los Angeles to Newark Airport in 7 hours and 32 minutes. Pretty amazing. Now to our news. A gigantic 7.2 earthquake struck a very remote area of Pakistan's Baluchistan province. Several people were injured in a small town called Dalbandan. TV footage showed panicked people rushing out of their homes into very cold conditions outside. Al Jazeera is saying that this is a very sparsely populated area. The epicenter of the quake was about 55 kilometers northwest of the town of Karan. Aftershocks are expected. This is a very active fault line. The quake was felt as far away as New Delhi, the Indian capital, and Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. People in India's province border of Rajasthan said cracks appeared in the walls of their rural homes. Well, the flooding in Australia has now moved to another province. It's now in Victoria province, not just Queensland. Authorities have told townspeople in the southeastern part of the country to flee their homes with 3 days of supplies. This was today, as a surging river threatened another community. Up to 1,500 homes in the town of Kerang in northern Victoria State could be affected if the Loddon River rises any further. The flooding in Victoria, of course, follows weeks of massive flooding in northeastern Queensland, which has swamped 2/3 of that state, left at least 30 people dead. Elsewhere in Queensland, authorities have given several of the state's coal mines exemptions from environmental rules so they could pump water out into their already flooded surroundings. The mining industry estimates that the flooding has cost about $2.3 billion US in lost sales. Floodwaters in Victoria have already left 1,000 households in the northwestern part of the country without power, and thousands more homes are under threat of cuts as low-lying power lines are submerged. Well, yesterday the Australian Prime Minister asked the insurance and reinsurance community to be generous in their treatment of claims. Munich Re has an answer. The world's biggest reinsurer says that it is sensational to describe insurance companies as lacking compassion in the wake of the country's devastating floods. But people who don't have flood coverage should not be compensated. The PM, Julia Gillard, had called on them to be generous in their interpretation of policies towards flood victims in Queensland and Victoria. The MD of Munich Re Australia, Heinrich Eder, says that people who do not have flood insurance cannot expect to be compensated for flood damage. Union Bank of Switzerland estimates that 60% of homeowners affected by the floods in Queensland might not be covered for flood insurance. Mr. Eder told the Australian Broadcasting Company that most people do not read the fine print in product disclosure statements, and consumers should not be covered if they didn't buy the insurance. He said, quote, "If you have a house and you have no fire insurance, and unfortunately you have a fire, then no one would suggest that your house should be paid for by the insurance companies." He said, "We have a large-scale disaster, and those who bought insurance for flood, they'll be compensated by those insurers, and those who haven't can't expect compensation for cover they've not bought." He says insurance companies had been generous in the past towards policyholders. Well, he certainly has a good point. You can't really argue with that. Argo Group has now joined the parade of reinsurers, raising loss estimates for the New Zealand quake. Argo is based in Bermuda. They said that the September quake is now expected to bring about $12 million US in estimated pre-tax losses. This is up a little bit from the 11.3 million that they had reported in their 2010 third quarter. Just before we went on the air, Insurance Insider came out with a little blurb saying New Zealand losses of Silent Lloyd's trio may top 100 million US. Insurance Insider says Lloyd's reinsurers Hiscox, Beazley, and Brit can expect a combined $110 million US hit from the New Zealand quake. This is according to Christopher Hitchings, who of course is with Keefe, Bruyette & Woods. In a detailed note on Lloyd's market, Hitchings estimated that Hiscox was now in line for about $50 million of losses from New Zealand. Carpenter's making some news. They're of course a subsidiary of Marsh. They have formed a dedicated facultative team in Iberia to be based in Madrid and Barcelona. Alejandro Ramirez returns to Carpenter from Brex Re. He's going to lead the operation. Mr. Ramirez will report to Artur Rene, CEO of Carpenter Iberia. Of course, Carpenter's on a little bit of a roll. They recently expanded into China, where they obtained a reinsurance broking license, greatly augmenting their previous representative office in Beijing. Broker Lockton International has taken a step closer to launching a new managing general agency by hiring senior members of its underwriting team. Insurance Times is reporting this. Lockton has also changed the new unit's name to Maplewood MGA from Northwood MGA. This is according to filings made with the company house in London. Stock market's up about 3.1%. Apple is actually doing quite well. They had a very, very strong quarter in December, despite Steve Jobs' leave of absence again. We'll go to a word from our sponsors and come back with the rest of the news.
Design for peace.
Well, one of the long-awaited releases every year, it's like the best dressed list, is the Aon political risk map. And they've come out with their 2011 political risk map. It's got some surprises. Bermuda is one of 19 countries that's been downgraded on the political risk map. Aon lowered Bermuda's rating from a low-risk jurisdiction to a medium-low-risk jurisdiction, to a medium-low-risk jurisdiction. Despite its downgrade, Bermuda still has Aon's second highest rating as a medium-low-risk country. Bermuda was downgraded along with a number of other island countries, including the Bahamas, the Caymans, Dominica, Grenada, Greenland, which I guess is an island country, Trinidad, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, quote, due to tighter global credit conditions, which could lead to an increase in sovereign non-payment risk. This is according to Aon. If you scratch the surface a little more, this is the real reason. They say, quote, we have seen 13 island nations move into a higher risk category this year because of the effect of a decline in tourism on their economy. There's some other countries that were downgraded: Algeria, Benin, Myanmar, Bahrain, and Iceland. Some of the countries that were upgraded were Kenya, Mozambique, Rwanda, Uzbekistan, Panama, and Georgia. 19 countries were downgraded, 11 countries were upgraded. XL Insurance's North American unit has brought in Joe Taco from Zurich Financial Services to head up its property team. Taco had been given the title of Executive VP in his new role. He's going to take charge of XL's North American Property and Global Asset Production Services unit. At Zurich, Mr. Taco had led the company's North American Property Group. He's going to be reporting to the Chief Executive at XL North America's P&C division, Serena Mogg. Well, Goldman came out with some numbers today. That would be Goldman Sachs. They said that their fourth quarter earnings fell 53% due to sharp declines in their investment banking business. They earned $2.23 billion after paying preferred dividends in the last 3 months of the year. That's down from about $4.8 billion last year. Analysts had been expecting the bank to earn $3.76 per share. They earned $3.79, so they actually did a little bit better. Keep this in mind: Goldman paid its employees $15.38 billion in salaries and bonuses, or 39% of its annual revenue for 2010. For the year, the bank's income fell 37%, down to $7.71 billion. Its revenue declined to just a shade under $40 billion. Well, the Swiss are definitely becoming a little bit more public relations oriented. Perhaps the list that Julian Assange has been handed by the Julius Baer banker has them highly sensitive to this. But the Swiss Foreign Minister, Micheline Calmy-Rey, announced this morning that they are going to freeze the assets of the deposed Tunisian President Ben Ali. At the same time, Tunisian prosecutors have opened an inquiry into Ben Ali's assets as well as those of his family. The inquiry will reportedly look at possible illegal financial transactions, foreign bank accounts, and real estate held by Ben Ali, his wife, his relatives, and his entourage. Wednesday's move, made this morning in Bern by the Swiss government, was announced at a cabinet meeting following domestic political pressure as well as legal action taken by Tunisian exiles in Switzerland. Here's what the foreign minister of Switzerland said: if this is not a shot across the bow of the U.S. Getting ready for the release of the Julius Baer CDs, quote, Switzerland wants to avoid our financial center being used to hide funds illegally taken from the populations concerned. Well, there will be more to come when that other shoe drops in the U.S., as we know. Well, for the final story, this is an interesting picture. You'll have to be of a certain age to appreciate it. First of all, it's in black and white, and on the right is President John F. Kennedy. The picture was taken in 1962. The picture is about 49 years old. The man to Mr. Kennedy's right, in the center of the screen, is a gentleman named Sergeant Shriver. Sergeant Shriver died yesterday at the age of 95. Sergeant Shriver was the brother-in-law of President Kennedy, the brother-in-law of Robert Kennedy. He married the sister, one of the 5 sisters of the Kennedy brothers, Eunice Shriver. Sergeant Shriver is also, or was also, the father-in-law of Arnold Schwarzenegger, former California governor. He was the father of former broadcaster Maria Shriver, who was Schwarzenegger's wife. Sergeant Shriver was also the very first director of the Peace Corps, an organization that exists in a very robust fashion today, set up by President Kennedy to send thousands of idealistic young Americans out throughout the world, basically doing good. Sergeant Shriver also stepped in as the emergency nominee for the Democratic vice presidential ticket with George McGovern in 1972 when Missouri Senator Thomas Eagleton was forced to resign that spot. I met Sergeant Shriver once. Maria Shriver was in my class at Georgetown University, although I never met her. But I did meet him. He was a very pleasant man, and even though I was a rambunctious undergraduate, he took the time to be kind to me and say hello to me and exchange a few words with me. I've never forgotten that. 95 years old. He lived a good life, and we'll remember it. That's all the news that we have for today. If we have any breaking news, we'll come back and tell you. If not, thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.